guys, Matt, Andrew, Irontrap Garage, working on Andrew's first hot rod project. So in the last video, you may remember, Andrew worked on getting all those brackets blown out. That was
fun.
Didn't look fun to me. Gave me some bad memories of the Sweetheart Roadster. So what do you got back there? Andrew was digging around behind the shop here in the spare parts bin.
Got a good Model A Crossmember.
So we got, this is actually, might have come out of the sport coupe that we're working on. We scavenged that, so it's a little rusty down in the tray area here, but it's solid where it needs to be because we're going to cut that off actually. So we're going to work on getting that removed. The other thing, we had a question from a couple viewers since Andrew's last video about cross measuring to check to see if a frame is square on these early cars. So we're going to do that because it's a good time right now before Andrew starts replacing parts to measure everything. So we're going to work on showing you guys how to measure to check for square, and we're also going to have Andrew start working on cleaning up that cross member and getting ready to replace the old ones. So we're going to get out the tape measure and some notes and get started. Alright guys, so we got our frame here on the stands like we talked about. What we did since the intro section was we got our frame all leveled out here. So we took a piece of box tubing on the back here, put a level across it, and put a piece of box tubing in the front. Made sure that everything's level. I'm doing it this way, A, because I have something on my frame table right now, so we didn't want to take that off. But B, just to show you guys how you can do this in your home garage. These old cars like this, they're really simplistic. If you check your level, make sure everything's square, you can do it in your home garage. So my garage floor is pretty level, so the front didn't need anything. Either my floor's out just a tiny bit or the frame has a slight little twist to it. We had the space up in the back passenger corner just a tiny bit. And we had a piece of box tubing in the back here, and the frame is level. So now we've established that the frame is level, we can start with getting our cross measurements done. So there's a bunch of frame dimensions online. If you look up Model A frame measurements, there's a bunch of diagrams that you guys can get to show measurements. I found this one that's on, says the website's 1929 FordHotRod.com. There's a bunch of different ones. I probably have all of them printed out. This one has cross measurements of the frame. Now what I found is this isn't really correct. Some of the measurements I found are possibly over an inch off or 3/4 of an inch off. Not quite sure. So you guys can print out all the things you want off the internet. Doesn't freaking matter. What you want to worry about is make sure that your frame is square. You want to make sure cross measurements are square on the frame, and really at the end of the day it doesn't matter what those measurements are within reason. What matters is that it is square when you're doing it across the frame. So what we're going to do is start by measuring the back half from the center cross member back to the rear cross member, and then we're going to measure the front cross member, the center cross member, doing these cross measurements, and we'll see where we end up, and that's going to tell us what kind of shape this frame's in and if it's going to take some major modifications to get it square again. So we'll get the tape measure out, start measuring stuff up, and we'll check out where we're at. Alright, so let's dive in and show you guys doing the cross measurements. So the first thing you want to do is try and break it up in the front half and the back half of the frame, and then we can do a full measurement. So what I like to do is pick holes that are common on the frame. We're fighting a little bit of trouble on this frame because there is some holes, or I should say holes, there's been some repairs. I use that word loosely on this frame in the back that covers up some of the factory holes, but we'll work around it. So what I like to do is there's these holes that are right behind the center cross member. That paper I was showing you, some of the ones online, a lot of them use this hole as the common point, so there's one on either side. So we're going to use this hole here, and then what we're going to do use is in the back, on the outside corner, there is a ovaled out hole that we like to use on the outside of the cross member. So Andrew's going to put that one in the center of that hole. And if you're using a tape measure, a little note, a lot of carpenter style tape measures, they have like an 1/8 inch or more slack in the tape measure. So you either need to take that slack out or let it pull it out or push it all the way in. So Andrew and I kind of have an understanding, whoever you're having you help measure, make sure that they understand that they need to either push it in or pull it out every time. So you have that set up there? Okay. So then I'm going to go to the center of this hole here. We have it pushed in, and we are at 59.25 here. So what we're going to do is swap. I'm going to go on the outside here. And on our frame, this side is where some of the repair has been done. So what we did is we took this magnetic flexible tape and laid it across and took measurements. We put a crosshair where it's supposed to be, and we're using that. And then what we're doing is we're taking a second measurement on these inside holes. There's 2 little holes here, and we'll drop a photo in right here, Mike. Drop that photo in of these holes here so you can see what we're using, just to double check since we are missing some holes. So go on your cross there. I'm going to go to the same hole on the other side here. Good? Yep. All right, so we are at 59 1/8. So according to this, we're about an 1/8 inch out on the frame here. That is not square, not good. So just to double check our measurements to make sure that it's not something with how we measured out for that cross there for our missing hole. So go to that inside one, get yourself centered there. Good?
Yep.
All right, I am at 57 1/4. All right, so 57 1/4. Good? We are 57 3/8. So we are an 1/8 inch out on the frame, definitely in this section here. So that is definitely out in this back half here because we've pretty much figured out that it's in this back half just by doing that. I'm not surprised because there's a lot of repairs that have been done here and probably something happened and it got an 1/8 inch out. An 1/8 inch is not great, but depending on what you're building, it's not uncommon to see on a Model A frame. With this car, since we're cutting this frame all apart, it's not a big deal right now, but we will correct it when we get a little further along. Since we are working with the back half, we're going to be doing a step on the frame. We can correct that when we do the rear cross member. We can make sure that we get that squared up when we get to that point. Now we need to check the front next. If that doesn't end up being square, then we definitely have a problem. We're going to need to correct all that right now because we're replacing that front cross member today. But the rear cross member we're not touching, so we're going to leave that alone for now, and we will correct it when we do the step, but we'll take that 1/8 inch out at that point. So let's jump to the front here, and we'll show you guys how we measure just the same thing in the front. All right, so now we're going to move on to the front. So we're going to use the same exact holes just behind the cross member right here. And what we're going to do is move forward to the long holes in the cross member where the radiator bolts down. We're going to use those holes as our other point that is the same to do our cross measurements. So Andrew's going to, again, hold that there. He's going to get it centered in that hole. And really the important part is that whoever's doing the lining up for the hole does it the same every time. It doesn't really matter. I mean, as long as it's centered the way they're holding it the same, that's what matters. That's kind of what I was saying, is going by the measurements is what is important, not necessarily what the internet may tell you. Good?
Yeah.
Slack out. All right, so we are at 60 3/4. So we're going to swap here. And he's going to line it up again right on that radiator hole. All right, radiator mounting hole. Good. 60 3/4. So Believe it or not, with this front cross member being a POS, it's still actually square in the front half of the frame, which is really surprising. So what that tells me is a kind of a nice relief. We can work on getting this front cross member replaced today, and we can work on just fixing that small 1/8" issue when we go to do the step in the frame in the rear. Again, an 1/8" is not great. I'm not saying if you're building a race car or something like that, but on antique cars that are almost 100 years old, an 1/8", depending on your car, you can let slide. But if I'm going to be rebuilding a whole entire frame, or you're going to be modifying stuff, you might as well take it out and get that 1/8" out. Just remember that the way I describe it to people is an 1/8" on this buggy suspension. A worn out set of shackles can give you over an 1/8" deflection of your suspension that can cause the same type of problem. So if you have a slight 1/8" out, and it's a nice frame, or it's a car that you're not cutting the frame apart, you could live with it, but if you have the means to do it, it doesn't hurt to correct it. That's kind of the end story. So got our cross measurements. Now what we can do, we have it clamped down to these stands here. We can work on getting this cross member out, and also getting the other cross member scavenged from the old frame rails that we have. We rough cut it out. So we'll get that all set up, and we'll work on getting this cross member replaced next. Alright, so Andrew got a lot done with a little bit of help from me. So I'll tell everybody what you were working on.
So first off, I cut this box tubing in here, welded in an X formation, one under the top lip of the frame and one above, so that when we cut the front cross member, it keeps everything in square, because that pretty much holds the front frame rails together. So from there on, we started taking apart this good cross member, and we got all the junk off of it, and I threw it in the blasting cabinet and cleaned it up. So it's looking nice, and it's ready to put in now.
Yeah, so Andrew earned his stripes taking old Ford rivets out today. When I had taken this out of the original frame, I just lopped the frame rails off because I didn't want to deal with it. So he had to do a lot of grinding and drilling and hammering and chiseling to get these out. What we ended up doing was saving the 6 total top rivet holes, and then also the side ones, the 4, 2 on either side. That way when we put it in, we can really get it locked into the original holes, and it should line up really well and won't take a lot of guesswork to get it where it needs to be. But this thing's looking pretty good. I think it needs a little bit more in time in the glass cabinet, but it's way better than it was. It was just covered in surface rust. This has a little bit of pitting, but it's still solid enough that I think it'll work just fine. Best part was it was free, donated from my stash of misfit parts. So that should be good to go. So next time we're going to work on getting the old Crossmember out of this. This is going to take a little bit of time as well because Andrew needs to drill more rivets.
My favorite thing.
So he's going to be really good at taking rivets out by the time we're done. But once we get that old Crossmember out, we can clean it up, slide the new one in. We checked the caster in the front Crossmember, and it actually was still okay. Nothing in the front end seemed like it was tweaked or it was bent too far. So we should be able to slide this in, clamp it in like it's supposed to be, and we can be good to go to move forward. So making progress. This thing's already looking way better.
Yeah.
So we're still looking for a 26-27 Model T coupe body. So Hershey's coming up really soon, but if any of you guys have a lead on a, let's say, I would call it serviceable Model T coupe body that Andrew can work with, we definitely appreciate it. If you guys give us a lead, we're not asking for free, just any types of leads on a reasonably priced body would be awesome. So that's all we got for this one. Appreciate you guys watching. We do videos on Andrew's first hot rod project on Sundays. Tuesdays we do the free tea, and Fridays is kind of a wild card of different projects and car shows and adventures. So thanks guys for watching. Catch you later.